Support comes from Sunday Morning Cafe, founded by researcher, speaker, and therapist Dr. Tom Wagner, offering many retreats with live music and online resources to build resilience and community. SundayMorningCafe.com.
This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha. Recent announcements made at St. Louis Lambert International Airport have been largely about arrivals, new routes to Europe, and ongoing plans like a $3 billion terminal consolidation. But after 16 years as the Lambert director, Rhonda Hamm-Niebruegge's most recent announcement was personal. She plans to retire. In her final weeks on the job, she spoke with STLPR's Abby Llorico to reflect on her tenure running Missouri's busiest airport. Abby started the conversation by asking Rhonda why she decided to retire.
You know, I actually had always thought I would retire at 65, which I hit last year, right? So as I started thinking about it and having 6 beautiful grandchildren that live here and wanting to spend more time traveling, you start looking at your life and you start saying, when's the right time, right? Because you don't want to get to a point where you can't enjoy things and you can't do the things you've always dreamed of doing. So I had actually made a decision last fall and shared with the mayor that I would retire as I went into this fall. So yeah, August 15th is my last day. And it just felt like it was the right time for me, having spent 44 years in a career that I love and finally seeing some of the really good things come to fruition. I thought it was time.
Talking about some of those things, first on the terminal consolidation plan, what does that timeline look like where we stand right now?
Right. So we are in the process. We recently got 30% design of the terminal, the garage, and the roadways, because this really is a campus revitalization based on everything that has to happen in order to build the terminal. Costs are coming in a little higher than we like, so we're working with the airlines to make sure that it's the right scope and the right size. And then we'll go from 30% to 60% design. That should happen by the end of the year, and that gives us a guaranteed price. And then from there, we go to 90% in the spring of next year, and if authorized by the airlines, would start construction next year. It is about a 4.5-year window to construct. So it's a lengthy project because you've got roadways, garage, and the terminal and other buildings that we're moving. But it's about a 4.5-year window once it starts.
And we're talking then about your oldest grandchild being in high school by then, so I can understand saying, you can't exactly wait for the end of that runway. Right. That said, the language, I want to make sure I'm clear on, are we calling it a new airport? Doesn't sound like it.
Right. We initially started as a consolidated terminal project because the thought is to bring both terminals into one, reimagine the historic domes, but yet have one consolidated terminal. And as we've morphed into it, it really is becoming an entire campus transformation. So I don't know that we've exactly picked the right word to call it, but it is a campus, what I would consider just a total campus reimagination of our airport.
How do you think about that reimagination with even just in the past 4.5 years, maybe give or take a few, how much air travel has evolved, and with technology changing, travelers' needs changing, how do you kind of wrap your head around what travelers will need in 4 years and then potentially, hopefully, decades to come?
Right. It's interesting because if you think about when this terminal was built, 1956, and we have this fabulous historic lobby, which actually still serves us well today. The rest of the facility does not, because it was built at a time when concessions weren't important. Places, people didn't think about coming to the airport to eat or to shop, or they came to the airport for the experience of flying and just the overall experience of aviation. That obviously has morphed dramatic over the last 4 or 5 decades. So as you start thinking about the future, you have to build a more adaptable terminal, one that can easily adapt to the changes. And that's been difficult for us. Here, with the existing facility, when you've got concourses that are very narrow and very little space for concessions, there's really not a way to adapt. You can try to update and do things, but it doesn't give you the revenue streams that you need. And today, terminals are much more just about the customer experience. They're really about helping to drive revenue to offset the cost to the airlines. So I think in designing this terminal and working with all of the design teams and construction teams, we've really focused on how can it morph if the industry continues to morph. Making wider concourses, making easily expandable gate opportunities, making sure that you've got pieces that can accommodate moving walkways or more ADA focused. Just everything that needs to be thought about as you're designing things. I think we now, with this terminal, can do that. That can carry us well into the decades. Most of the things, when you think about ADA having accessibility for everyone, that wasn't something that was thought about in 1950. All of those things have come into play now, so they're going to be here forever. So it is much easier, I think, to think about the future and adaptability than it was in 1956.
The new routes internationally to Frankfurt, which is now running 5 days a week.
5 days a week.
And flights to London, which I know I'm not the only one who's price shopping those for this spring. Talk a little bit about what's gone into getting those on the map, but then keeping those on the map for St. Louisans.
So it has been a long process. We've obviously been working with international carriers and even domestic carriers that operate international, but the focus has really come from the European carriers looking to come into more mid-sized markets in the U.S. and have a bigger part or co-share, I guess, with the number of customers that they're carrying. So we've been very focused on it for a number of years. What we saw a lot of other markets doing was that the state or the region was coming to the table because it is somewhat of a gamble for a new international carrier to come into a mid-sized market because you're just drawing from the local community. You're not bringing that connecting traffic in like we used to have with the TWA hub. So it was much different. And a lot of other communities, states came to the table to put incentives there, and that really kind of drew the airlines to those communities first, even though we felt like we could be more successful based on our size and our draw throughout further than just our metropolitan area, but more into other parts of the state and even Illinois. But we didn't have a really good offer on the table. And so I started working with the business community 6 years ago and said we really need to partner together if we want to try to attract an international business or international flight activity. And so we did. The first partnership came through Greater St. Louis Inc. and through the Port Authority of St. Louis County. And they put an offer on the table to help those first 2 critical years. Lufthansa was the first to come in for that. The 2 years was the commitment, and now they've been here. We're going into our 4th year. They've expanded this year, and that flight's been extremely, extremely successful, both from a business perspective, but a leisure as well. And as we got the taste of what that meant, then everybody wants more, right? So we worked again with the Port Authority, with Explore St. Louis, to put another package on the table, and this time it was to really try to lure British Airways. And they saw the success of Lufthansa. They saw some of the things that were happening, and this was a perfect year to start. We've got the FIFA Cup in Kansas City. We've got the Route 66 anniversary. So we came to an agreement last fall and announced that both of those flights would have never happened without the support we had from this region and the community. So people have to understand it's not just the airport, it's a broader effort because those carriers need to see that the community's behind it. You can put a flight in, you mentioned retaining. If you don't fill it and they can't make money, it's not going to stay. So both flights are just extremely successful. British Airways is, I think, over the moon with what they're seeing in terms of our passengers, both on the business side, buying those business seats and filling those up, but then the leisure market as well. And we're seeing more growth coming in from Europe to St. Louis, which was another key piece for us. We've always felt that the Midwest is overlooked sometimes when customers coming from Europe are here. And we do think with the marketing efforts of Explore St. Louis, with the marketing efforts that BA is doing, that we're now starting to see more Europeans come to St. Louis and see what the center of the United States looks like.
Most people are not traveling internationally on a very regular basis, if they travel at all on a regular basis. Why is this expansion of international flights, something that's worth the resources and the attention of their leaders for most people in the St. Louis region?
Yeah. Well, I think for the business community, it's critically important, not only from a cost perspective of time saved, hotels, per diems, all of those things, but more from a business perspective of putting St. Louis on the map and helping to grow our international footprint. And we have a lot of companies. When we started working on this, I think we identified, in partnership with the World Trade Center, 42 companies either based here in St. Louis, headquartered here in St. Louis, or have operations here in St. Louis that are also doing business in Europe. And that's kind of eye-opening when you don't think about it. Some of those are small, some of those are big, obviously. And I think you just don't realize the impact it can have to help grow those opportunities. And when we took a group over with the World Trade Center on the inaugural flight, we had a lot of different meetings with similar groups over there that were their regional chambers or their business environment groups. And the amount of people that we talked to that were doing business here in a very small way, and we're looking to grow that. And now that the nonstop flight is there, just the access and the awareness of what's in St. Louis. So from the business side of the house, it's been the number one ask I took since I took this job was go fix our lack of international service. So it has been a key quest, I would say, for the business community to get that. And then on the leisure side, it does help us grow our awareness both in and out, right? It's just easier when you can get on a flight nonstop and be in London or be in Frankfurt and take a train anywhere throughout Europe. It gives people encouragement to say, let's go see what else the world looks like. And then for people coming in, again, people think of going to New York, you think of going to LA, maybe Chicago, maybe Miami. We are just an incredible community for people to come see, and really the heartland of America. So I do think that it brings a different perspective, both from the possibility of of leisure growth, business growth, and then helping, obviously, the economy of our region.
We're listening to Abby Llorico's interview with the outgoing director of St. Louis Lambert International Airport, Rhonda Hamm-Niebruegge. We'll be back shortly to continue this conversation. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio.
Support comes from Gemma, architects, planners, and designers seeking to bring joy to their clients and communities. Details at gemastl.com.
Welcome back. I'm Elaine Cha. In the coming weeks, Rhonda Hamm-Niebruegge will depart Lambert St. Louis International Airport for the last time as its director. Rhonda spent more than 25 years in aviation management positions with American Airlines, Trans World Airlines, and Ozark Airlines. She played a major role in the merger of TWA and American Airlines when American purchased TWA in 2001 and when the American hub in St. Louis was dismantled. In a recent conversation, STLPR's Abby Llorico asked Rhonda to reflect on that time in her career.
I think it was probably the toughest 6 years of my career, both professionally but also personally, because being a resident of St. Louis since the late 80s and growing our family here too and our children and always wanting them to stay, it was hard to see what was happening. But yet the industry was changing so quickly after 9/11 and even between the late 80s and early 90s as deregulation took hold and as airlines started consolidating, and we went from 13 carriers to 10 carriers to 8 carriers to 5 to now really 3 left of those days, the 3 legacies, American, Delta, United, and then Southwest, of course, came into play. But it was really hard to see what was happening with the region and the loss of that, but there was no one to blame. I think my being so close to it I was the more rational side that said, I understand what Americans doing, right? They had this large hub in Chicago. 9/11 happened. The world was changing. Things were just different. And so for me, I think I understood and felt the reason why. Still didn't make it any easier to accept, right? So that time frame, as we were pulling down, kind of little by little, trying to manage the place, gave me the opportunity to really get more connected to the region and to really start working with the business community on thinking about the life that we're now going to be facing without this legacy hub that flew all over the world. And so I think that's what really morphed me to get so engaged in the community, which ultimately led to this role.
Was going on then to run Lambert a bit of a redemption arc for you?
It was. I think the biggest reason I took it was to try and figure out how do I build something back that I was a part of taking apart. Because it meant so much to me to be here all those years and to have the opportunities I had with TWA. So it was a bit of a redemption to say, and I knew it wasn't going to be easy, right? It was not an easy task, but it was an opportunity for me to say, we are better than that. We can build back. We can be more. Maybe we won't be exactly what we were, but we can be more. We can be better.
Just before COVID, there was an effort about exploring privatization of the airport. Proponents for this type of system argued it would increase productivity, efficiency, improve airport infrastructure, but really others here were quite worried about that loss of local control or even the process through which this was being explored with St. Louis leadership at the time. The effort ultimately fizzled out, as you well know. Curious about, especially with it far enough perhaps in the rearview mirror, how you were seeing that exploration effort.
Yeah, it was tough for the airport to watch that process, and mainly because we are a public utility. We're here to serve passengers and goods, right? Getting people and goods across the world. That's our mission. And in U.S. airports, they were never meant to be for-profit opportunities. That's just not the way U.S. airports have worked. Other parts of the world, they are. But when you turn something into a for-profit, you do lose the customer mind, right? It's more about the profit side of the house. A lot of good things can come out of it. You can have bright new, facilities. You can have lots of other things. But what does that mean ultimately for the consumer? And I think that's where both airlines, U.S. airlines, and most cities, there's only one that's privatized for the most part is San Juan. There's a couple of other smaller general aviation airports. But I think that the pride of a community of owning that and being able to shape that and grow your partnerships with the airlines on the other side being concerned about what their costs are going to do because they lose somewhat of that control of cost where the way we operate today, we work with the airlines and make decisions together. So I do think it's a hard concept in the U.S., and I think being a community that was going to go out and kind of do this first, there was just a lot of skepticism about, is it the right thing and will it work? And if it doesn't, where does that leave us? So I think that was the challenging piece of it. From the morale at the airport, it was just hard, right? People were working really hard to try to bring the airport back to be a pride again in the region, and it was hard to watch some of the criticism. It was hard to watch some of the things that were being said and done. So ultimately, I think at the end of the day, we were happy to see it go to the side.
Then St. Louis Mayor Lyda Krewson actually announced on St. Louis on the Air that the exploration was no longer moving forward. Had you gotten a heads up? Do you remember?
It was December 19th. And we were doing a luncheon over at Bandanas for Christmas with some of the staff. And she called me on the way in and said, I'm about to go on NPR and announce. And I said, thank you. That means a lot to us. And she said, well, I wanted you to know before I went on the radio. So I only had a heads up a few minutes in advance, but I did know. And of course, when I walked into the Bandanas and told the employees, there was a huge round of applause, because I think it just brought a lot of joy to people to know that we would stay as we are, with moving things forward, right? It's never perfect, but we would still stay as a utility to the public. So.
First, I appreciate you not getting on social media and scooping us with that and allowing us to deliver that news. But it's interesting to hear how tough it was on morale because of perhaps, I imagine, people saying these are all the things that need to be better about the airport. Mm-hmm. Do you find, though, that in the wake of that, there's perhaps been a new understanding from the St. Louis region about the role the airport does and could play in the just overall betterment of St. Louis?
I think so. I think it was a turning point, very similar to when the tornado happened. And we saw...
And you're talking about the Good Friday
tornado. The Good Friday tornado in 2011. And, there was still a lot of angst at that time just based on the downsizing and everything that happened. But when you realize you're losing a critical infrastructure due to the tornado damage, all of a sudden people say, we need this, right? We need this. And with the help and the partnerships that we had been built, we reopened the very next day, and within 3 days had a full operation again. That, I think, helped lead the community on that first path of our airport is important. No matter what it may be today, it is important, and we need to come together to move it forward. So I think when that effort happened with the privatization, there were lots of different facets, and people felt like it was being pulled apart again, not together. And so I think when that exercise was ceased, it gave everybody more momentum to say, okay, we all want our airport, right? We all want it to be the best that it can be. We want it to be better. So let's pull together. Let's focus on that. Let's not be in different ways of how we think about our airport. So I do think it brought people together. It certainly brought, I think, the opportunity for us at the airport and my role as the director working with the business community to say, I need you. We need you, right? Our airport needs you. You need our airport. So let's work together. And that's how we got the partnerships for the incentives to move forward with the flight. So I think when you start seeing things come together and you realize that if we stop trying to fix something maybe that's not broken but needs work and we work on it together, then you can really move the needle.
So was a silver lining of the maybe dark cloud of that conversation and that exploration that the airport was kind of re-centered in the public consciousness as an asset?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. We always viewed it, obviously, as an asset. And I go back, we did an economic impact study in 2013, and we were $3.2 billion economic impact to the state. We did a new one 2 years ago in partnership with Greater St. Louis Inc. We are now a $6.5 billion. We've doubled our economic impact in a decade. And when you realize that we can even do more if we all work together and come on the same page, you think, okay, maybe in the next 7 to 8 years, we can be a $10 billion economic impact. So I do think that a lot of those things really highlighted the need, the focus. We all know that our airport's a dated airport, right? We've done so many things to lighten it, bring art in, bring local restaurants in, do things, but we are working with a facility that's constrained. And so I think coming together, recognizing the strength, the asset, the economic impact, and what can put us on that next level.
Another idea that was in big discussions pre-COVID that actually is kind of coming back to the conversation is the city-county merger and the idea of unifying St. Louis City and St. Louis County. Would that have a major impact on the airport?
Well, I think it would depend how the unification worked and what it meant. There's been lots of things tossed around, right? And I probably only know what I read from the various different groups. But I think if you did something like that, more than likely the airport would become a true independent authority, where you had a board, an authority that was appointed, whether that comes from regions around the state, part of this, the city, the county, whatever, but that board would ultimately be the decision maker for the airport in partnership with the airlines and the airport team. You would no longer have those layers. That is, not all airports operate. There are still a number of city-owned airports throughout the country, some very large ones. But that would be a more streamlined position. And if the unification included the airport in however that, final proposal was or would end up being, more than likely you would set up an independent authority as far as the airport.
Is that a good thing?
Everybody's got their opinions.
Is that something that you think travelers or St. Louisans would notice?
No, I don't think so. Most people don't even know how we operate today. It is complicated. So I don't think the public would. The processes behind the scenes would.
We are not officially, but a Southwest hub is what a lot of people consider us, and it's the kind of default airline. But people have been talking about some of the changes being made at Southwest and how the experience isn't what it used to be. How much is Lambert's success tied into Southwest's continued success?
It's big right now. I mean, I think, they're 60% of our operation. The other partners that we have, and we have a number of them because we were able to bring in a lot of new partners over the last few years, have very strong operations, and they're very sound too. But most of those aren't looking to grow to any great magnitude, right? So the Americans, the Deltas, Uniteds, we get incremental flights here or upgraded aircraft here, but as a whole, those legacy carriers are set where their hubs are set. They're large, significant hubs. And so Southwest was the partner that we went after, that we grew with. And now 35% of their operation is connecting. That was significantly less when that started building here. So I think they are a critical partner. We obviously work very closely with them, all the changes that are happening within their organization as well, to say, are we fitting into those? And if not, what do we need to do to fit into those? And are there things that we can do to even highlight that more, why the partnership here is so strong? So you can't ignore them, right? They are an incredible partner and have been an incredible partner for us. So I think you have to keep focused, again, on, you got to always look what's coming down the pike next year. You can never settle.
The mayor's office recently announced the official search for your successor. What will their biggest challenge be, and what do you think they need to know about the job in the region?
Yeah, I think if the person comes from outside the St. Louis area, I think the biggest challenge is getting acclimated to people here, right? I think we are a region that we want to know the people. We want to know, especially in a position like this, who is the person running the airport? What's their background? Are they going to talk to us? Are they going to come out? So I think whoever comes in, a key piece will first be connecting themselves to the region, making sure that they are out and we are introducing them to the various organizations. This operational team here is so strong. They know how to run the airport. They can do that. So someone's not going to have to come in and say, oh, I need to fix the operation of the airport. That's not going to be a challenge. The team here is good. They know what they're doing. But I think if it is someone that's outside of this area, just really acclimating themselves to who is St. Louis, what are all the gems we have here, and how does the airport play into those different partnerships. We have such strong partnerships with Explore St. Louis, right? Because if they bring more conventions, we bring more people. If the zoo, the botanical gardens, the history museum, we have relationships with all of those, and we do a lot of things in partnership with them. If someone comes in, they need to know what their value also is in the region. What is the value of having this beautiful history museum, art museum, zoo, botanical gardens, and what role do they play in moving the airport forward? And if you look throughout the airport, through the Explore St. Louis, we highlight all these things, right? We highlight through our advertising program with Explore St. Louis all of these wonderful things that we have. So the person in charge here needs to know, understand, and if you don't know a little bit more about St. Louis, then dig your heels in as you're coming in and learn all of the great things we have, right? Because somebody's always going to tell you what we don't have. We don't have mountains, we don't have oceans, right? We know that. But we have so many good things. And so I think that's what the person initially is going to have to focus on. Obviously, we're in the middle of a big project too. So, somebody that's got some idea of how large programs work, it would be very beneficial, understanding that, this is a massive undertaking that we're looking at. So again, we've got lots of good people at the table working on that. Our design teams, our construction teams, the program man, they're all really, really great teams, all working in sync. But the person coming in is going to have to indoctrinate themselves to where we're at and everything.
Interesting, because where we're sitting right now, we just heard a plane go overhead outside the window here. But it sounds like what you're saying, knowing how to run an airport is almost secondary to the business development side of things for you.
Yeah. It is. I think, there's so many pieces. It's because it's like running a city, right? I mean, we are an all-inclusive enterprise fund out of the city of St. Louis. So we operate independently in terms of revenue, in terms of cost, all of those things. And the team here has one sole focus. It's the safety of our passengers and the operation of this airport. That being said, we are a critical asset in the region. So in the position as the director, you've got to think on a broader scale about what other assets do we have that can impact the region. We've got vacant land that potentially can be redeveloped, right? What does that mean? What are the types of development that the region would want, that the city would want, that the state would want to do with opportunities like that? So you can't just isolate yourself and think, okay, here's our operation inside the fence and here's what we're doing. You really do have to think about a strategic, and you have to think about, it's helpful to understand the airline side of the business because it's continually morphing. And when we lost everything, we were only a local market. We've been able to grow back quite a bit because of that connecting market. But if that gets jeopardized, what does that mean, right? What does that mean to the flights that we have? What does it mean to the region if we don't have as many nonstop destinations? So it's also those airline strategic partnerships and understanding the challenges they have and how we can best fit into them. So there's a lot when you think about it. It's not just running the airport day to day. And again, you build your teams that are strong to do that piece so you can focus on bigger things that are really more strategic and fit in with what the region and the state's looking.
That was outgoing Lambert International Airport Director Rhonda Hamm-Niebruegge speaking with STLPR's Abby Llorico.
This episode was produced and engineered by Abby Llorico. Podcast design by Aaron Dorr.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Hi, I'm Laura Hamden, and my colleague Jessica Rogan and I are your daily hosts of the Gateway newsletter. We meet with the editors in the STLPR newsroom every weekday to bring you the top local stories of the day in a quick and easy 6-minute read by 6 a.m. In an age of overwhelm, it's a refreshing, thoughtful take on the news day, if we do say so ourselves. Fine-tune your daily news habit with the Gateway newsletter. Subscribe at stlpr.org/gateway.